Hi, welcome to Fireside Snack. Let's grab a snack and sit down to chat. We're Abby and Gabby, two recovery coaches eager to share our lived and professional experience in the world of mental health and eating disorders. In our time together, we hope to grab a bite to eat and connect with ourselves and each other. Our hope with this podcast is to inspire you to take care of yourself by building a life you don't want to run away from. As a disclaimer, the information shared in this podcast is based on the personal experiences of Abby and Gabby and is intended for informational purposes only. It is not a substitute for professional advice, diagnosis, or treatment. If you are seeking support or have concerns about your mental health, please consult with a licensed professional. Enjoy your fireside snack. Hi everyone, welcome to Fireside Snack. My name is Gabby and I'm joined by my co-host,
Abby, that's my name.
Abby and Gabby, that's us. And this is our podcast, Fireside Snack. We are two recovery coaches who have lived experience with eating disorders and working in the field. And we are very excited to chat with you today and have snack, which is one of our most important things on the podcast. Abby, what are you having for snack today?
Something new. And I'm a little excited because I know, Gabby, we talk a lot about your poppies, your seltzer. I love that you love seltzer waters. I do not. But there's a sparkling water brand that has like juice called Bonsai. And this is their pineapple mango ginger. And it's whatever the chef's kiss. I forgot how to do the hand signal now that we're in the moment. It's amazing. So I'm excited to have that today. And then I also have some cheese and peanut butter crackers, all-time fave snack. So ta-da.
It's a good one. I honestly was just thinking before the podcast started that I wish I had stuff to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich because it sounds, I don't know if it's like spring or summer, but it's the vibe. I've got water. And then I'm trying, this is not riveting or exciting because I bring popcorn all the time, but it's a new brand of popcorn and it's butter flavor and I really, really like it so far. So that's what's going on in my neck of the woods. Abby, we have a very exciting topic to talk about today. Do you want to lead us in?
Absolutely. I am so stoked about this. In fact, Gabby and I have so much to say about this topic that we're not doing one episode, we're doing two. So we're talking about social media, how it fuels disordered eating, changes how we feel about ourselves. We're going to talk a lot about it. The first episode, which you're tuning into now, we'll get a little bit into why it's important. In the second episode, we're going to talk more about what we can do, what institutions and companies can do, and how you can get the ball rolling with that. But that being said, we got a lot of ground to cover before we ever hit episode 2. And I know we're both pretty passionate about this topic. Social media impact is maybe understated. Like it's got some impact. I don't even know another word, but it's intense.
It's really affecting us. Abby talked about her research last time. This was my research project where I wrote up a 3-page summary of all of my thoughts and feelings about social media. So we're going to talk about some of the different trends that are also happening that we're seeing a lot on social media nowadays. And so we're going to talk a little bit about it. But you know me, I'm a stats girl. Gotta have the statistics ready. So I'm going to give us a couple of stats about social media and eating disorders to get us started on why the heck we're talking about this today. So, according to the Eating Recovery Center, 46% of teens aged 13 to 17 feel worse about their body image due to social media.
That's a harrowing statistic. 46%. And I know we'll get to dig into this more, but developmentally, it's such a important time of life, and to know like there's direct research supporting that oftentimes broadly almost 50% people are feeling worse after being on social media.
Well, and this next stat is something that you and I talk about quite a bit in the podcast, Abby, which is being really intentional with our content in order to not provide a handbook or guidebook for other people who have followed in our steps. So according to World Metrics, 88% of people with eating disorders use social media to compare their appearance to others. Of those, 35% view social media as motivation for disordered eating.
Oof.
Is it surprising to us, Abby?
No. And I hate to see the number. I think what's weird about this is I've never seen statistics put to what I know from my own experience. I know we've talked about this and have kind of shared experience in that way, but it makes sense, unfortunately. But to see the numbers like that is, it's a little painful. That's hard.
Something that might be interesting for us to talk about too, Abby, is when did you get social media? At what age did you start getting online and dabbling your toes in it? And then I'll answer and talk about MySpace, which was back in my day.
So I did not get social media until I was 16, maybe. My parents knew, like, just, I guess personality wise, how I would operate in that space. And so I didn't get it until later in life, 16. Like a 3-year-old has their own social media account. So just for the moment, I was 16. And Instagram was, no, I think Pinterest was my first social media. Then Instagram was really what I stuck with at the beginning. And it was a whole new world. My time seemed to disappear because all of it was spent on the sites. Yeah, Gabby, you said MySpace was kind of where you got your start.
Yep, MySpace was where I got my start as a social media influencer at the young age of 6th grade. So in 6th grade, MySpace came out, and then we had transitioned over to Facebook. And then, as I've gotten older, Instagram became a thing. Tumblr was really big. Vine was big. The OG TikTok, basically, is what I will call Vine. And I really struggled on it. I didn't have siblings when I was growing up. And so after school, right when I would get out of school, I would log on and I would be talking to my friends over Instant Messenger, posting on each other's walls, having my top 3 on MySpace of who are my best buds, and kind of sorting people out. So I think it was really, really impactful on me from a young age. I definitely remember being consumed by friends getting more likes than me, or seeing people hang out and not invite me to places. So I definitely think that it impacted me when I was younger, and I can only imagine if I saw that at 6th grade, let alone having it ahead of time, how deeply it would have impacted me.
And so as much as we know how much it's impacted us, statistics are showing in a broad sense, it's not accidental. And I think something that you've done some of your research on is just how social media platforms like Facebook, Instagram, TikTok often promote or like highlight filtered, edited bodies and faces. And when we look at the statistic that 88% of people with eating disorders use social media for comparison, that makes such an impact. It's like keyword of the day. We're going to have to count how many times I say that, but it's true.
No, it truly is true. And so some of the things that we'll talk about today, first one being what you spoke to, Abby, the highlight effect. I think that there's this big idea on social media that we always have to post our achievements or what we're getting up to. Like, I remember when I was growing up, especially in college, right? I would see people who were writing research papers or getting internships or getting jobs. And you see these people and they're doing these big things and they've got these big projects or all of these really cool things. And then I'm just sitting in my dorm room doing homework and hanging out with my friends, and life doesn't feel as exciting. Now I look back on my college experience and I'm like, wow, that was so much fun. I had a blast in school. I wish I could go back. But during the time that I was in college, I was so focused on having the college experience that I didn't enjoy my time as much as I could have if I would have been fully present for things.
I think it's such a good point because I've heard someone say, don't compare your low light reel to someone else's highlight reel. Basically, what we see on social media, people are only posting the absolute wins and perhaps exaggerating them, really not talking about that after they got the interview. They found out that like it was being revoked. All that we ever see, right, is I got the interview, they loved it, it was wonderful. So there's so much behind, like the context is missing. And then if we're leading just in an average space, a neutral space, all of a sudden it feels like we're at a deficit. And then it's what are you going to do to make it up?
Yeah, it reminds me of that FOMO saying, that fear of missing out. You're just living your simple everyday life, which is 99% of humanity, just like existing and doing the day to day. And then you see though people who are on a boat in Cabo, and you see people who are backpacking through China, and people who got a dream job at Goldman Sachs, and all of these really cool, exciting things. But to your point, Abby, those are not things that are happening all the time. But when that's only what that person posts, I don't think, like for me, if I apply for a job and I make it all the way through the interview process and then I get rejected, I'm not going to be like, hey guys, had a great experience in life today. Learned a lot about myself, learned a lot about the world at large.
Yeah.
Like, I don't do that. We only really talk about when we've achieved something, when we've done something, when there's these big monumental life changes. And so I think it can also lead to that fear of missing out, fear that you're not doing enough, and then just feeling like you aren't enough because you're not doing these riveting, exciting things on a day-to-day, nor can most people afford to actually do that.
Yeah. And the nature of eating disorders really feeds into that narrative that we're not enough, we're not doing enough, that there's something missing, and the eating disorder becomes a solution. But it fits in so well with that atmosphere that a lot of us find ourselves in on social media, where things that you might already be a little bit softer about are exaggerated when we look at it on social media. And the eating disorder, disordered eating, starts to look like more of a safe option or solution. So I think the interplay between social media and eating disorders and disordered eating it's not, I wouldn't call it delicate. It's like a vicious cycle of reinforcement and going back and forth.
And I think that speaks to a lot of what our eating disorder serves the purpose of. Is our eating disorder serves the purpose of, I don't feel comfortable, safe, in control of my body. And so I'm going to kind of go outside myself and try and fix X, Y, and Z. And I feel like that's where social media can be so dangerous, though, is you're looking for something to distract you or get out of your head. But the things that you're using to distract yourself with are all of these highlight reels from other people. And so then you're trying to cope and you're trying to do something differently, and then you see something and get triggered, or you think you have a curated feed and somebody pops up, and it can derail you for the rest of the day. I'm curious, Abby, when you got on social media, what was your experience like interacting with other people? Were you kind of a lurker who was just behind the scenes and liking and commenting on everybody's stuff but not really posting? Were you really active?
I was not very active, and it was an intense fear that I was going to mess something up, portray myself in a way and have bad reactions. I think, you touched on trends. There was a trend at the time of something called To Be Rude, and you could comment, and they would send you a DM with something horrible about yourself. I was brand new to social media. I didn't know what acronyms meant. And so I thought it was, I don't know, something random. Sure, I'll participate. And they made a comment about my appearance. And I still remember it to this day.
Mm-hmm.
Come a long way. I'm pretty confident in who I am externally, internally. And I still remember. And at times it jumps in my mind, the comment that I got when I first, it was within my first week or two on social media, just overwhelmingly so. And so then I didn't want to post. I would post, every so often, spacing it, the metrics of what time are people most likely to be on social media to like the post. It's a full-time job. For all 12 of my followers, because I had just got on social media, so it was tough. What did that look like for you?
Yeah, I was very active on social media, but I have a lot of social media anxiety still to this day. I used to be I had a sweet spot in my early 20s where I was I'm confident and I'm going to post everything. And that was great. I loved that for me. Great for me. But I remember when I was an adolescent, I really struggled with social media. And then even now, I really struggle with social media of being vulnerable and being perceived by other people. I think that's also another wild thing to your story, Abby, where you're talking about how you're a young person and you saw this thing, and so you sent somebody a picture of yourself and said, rate me, basically.
Yeah.
Which is a wild concept for us to think about, is us as little tiny children going around trying to seek validation from strangers on the internet. And I think that's a very, very scary thing, especially when things like likes and comments are what we're basing our posts on. And I think that's what we'll talk about next, is that dopamine feedback of getting comments, getting likes, negatively reinforcing certain things about yourself if you don't meet your standards of what you should be receiving from your followers, but also the positive things that you receive when you get good comments and comments about your appearance and what you look like.
I think in a broader context too, it's important to highlight that they are developing addiction treatment specifically for cell phone usage, video games, social media. I've heard it from clients and I felt it myself. There were plenty of times that I hear from others or have felt that when I was at my sickest, I got the most praise. And what kind of reinforcement is it that people on social media who know nothing about how horribly sick I was, those are the moments when tell me XYZ, what's happening here? And it's so hard to break away from. Because I, in those moments, would often rather listen to the feedback I'm getting from people that don't know me and this social media space than my medical team. And it was so hard to pull away from. I went off social media for a while and really had to change how I interacted with it coming back. Because for me, that dopamine, the cycle was really hard to break out of.
It's very hard, and I think it leads to everybody at some point in time being like, I'm deleting all of my apps and I'm throwing my phone into the ocean, because it's literally such a thing that we wake up and we feel so much anxiety about it. I think it's important to highlight too that it can really validate some really risque behaviors too, because I know we talked about the highlight reels and we've talked about that a lot. I think on the polar side of that, we have these highlight reels and you get reinforced more and more for meeting beauty standards, but you also get reinforced for possibly wearing less clothing or doing something like scandalizing on social media. You might also get a lot of feedback if you are like exhibiting behaviors, or if you make a shocking post about something negative like a breakup. Or I think that's a big thing too, is that we're seeing a lot of shock value things that are going on social media, and then those just get validated over and over and over again.
I think an interesting dynamic of just kind of different sides of the reinforcement. So I've been at certain points in my life in like a societal approved body size, and that was when I was getting a lot of the positive feedback for my eating disorder. Let's just make sure that's clear. I am very comfortable. I live in a larger body. And to now experience another side of reinforcement on social media, of it being like people commenting horrible things that may or may not know you, and reinforcing the belief that I needed my eating disorder in a larger body, because now look at what people are saying. So either way, my eating disorder was grabbed as a solution. It's either getting reinforced like this is the way to continue to connect with people, or you're not being approved and this is the solution. So it's a double bind. You can't win there.
The statistic earlier about people utilizing social media as ways to fuel their eating disorders, I mean, I wish I could say that I am above that and have not done that before, but I definitely have gotten caught in some different comparison traps of looking at friends or people I used to know, or even influencers. I was X amount years old this year when I realized that celebrities have entire teams of people that they pay as an anti-aging team, basically, that you utilize to make yourself look younger, more youthful. If I go to Taylor Swift's page and I look at her stuff, she's not saying like, yep, my team today this morning made me a green smoothie and I spent 2 hours at a facial. She just posts the picture, right? And we think got out of bed and looked like this. And it's like, I don't know if that's necessarily true. And so I think not only is it reinforcing some different stuff, but we're also not getting the full picture of what's going on and what's happening in people's daily lives.
I knew this was going to be such a I was gonna get heated. Not heated, but like passionate. I think something else to talk about in this comparison trap is comparing recoveries. I cannot tell you how many recovery accounts I followed and used to prove that I was not good enough at recovery to keep doing it, and therefore I should quit. And it was constantly the highlight of, I did this challenge, I've made this milestone. And while the intent was to be inspirational, I used it as motivation for eating disordered behaviors because I'm not doing that. I can't do that. And it was deflating. So even within recovery circles, that comparison can still exist equally and be just as damaging.
I'm so glad that you brought that to our attention because I think that's something that we even see in real life. It's not necessarily social media, but it's this impact of technology and being on Zoom and seeing that Zoom now has something where you can filter your face for calls. All of these things when it's just like, I'm just trying to go to my 8 a.m. meeting.
Yeah.
But yet there's so many layers upon what that has to look like and bringing our best selves. Is our best self just our most curated version of ourselves? That's what society seems to be really digging at these days.
I think it's so important that we're having these conversations. Gabby, when you brought up this as a topic, I am so glad that it was just put into our queue because we don't think about it a lot of times. It comes in at surface level and it's just that 30 minutes, an hour, even after we're off our social media, we feel like crap and we don't know why. Or all of a sudden it's like doom scrolling. It's called that for a reason, but it's just taken for granted as a part of the experience of being on social media. And it's not okay. And there has to be, or is, other options. But if we don't really dig in like this, talk about the impacts, talk about the effects, we never have the wool pulled off our eyes where we can see that there is another way. I'm just stoked. This is really important.
It's hard because it's talked about all the time. We're always talking about the impact of social media. And I feel like we talk about it in these broad strokes, but we don't talk about what it actually looks like to us. And I think, too, with all of these problematic things happening on social media, I also think there's trends that social media promotes that are really, really harmful. And so a little pivot that I'd like to take us down is talking a little bit more about people who are posting about wellness. And I'm curious your thoughts on wellness and fitness, inspiration, and clean eating, and all of these things.
Well, first, credit one of my first dietitians that I ever had in treatment that was like, do you wash your food? And I was like, I mean, my vegetables, yeah. She's like, then it's clean. Congrats. You've eaten clean food. The concept, the things that we are like packaged and bundled just to sell that there's something wrong. Clean eating, wellness culture. It's a pursuit of something that isn't usually attainable. And the visuals that we have around wellness is a very like privileged encounter. It's like the spa and there's music and there's this very zen, when a lot of America and the world is working and has kids and partners that there's like squabbles with. And it sells the belief, the lie that you should be like flat, like emotionally perfect, calm, contained, like all the time. And it's not how any of this was made. I'm going on a tangent here, but like the core of wellness can just be like doing what's right for ourselves. It doesn't have to be the gummies that are like sold by XYZ that are supposed to make you be however. It's I have such intense dislike of these circles because they sell something that's inaccessible to make you feel like you don't have enough, and then it's like a selling inadequacy. So that's how I feel, Gabby.
Yeah. No worries. Yeah. Capitalism, screw it. No, but I truly do feel that way. I feel like there is such a thin line that we're walking between wellness and clean eating and Fitspo and then being a cover for disordered eating. And so we've never really talked about this on the show, but I want to speak a little bit to orthorexia and speaking a little bit about what that looks like. So for those of you who are listening to our podcast and you've never heard of orthorexia, I'm going to describe it to you and give you the definition from WebMD. So orthorexia is an unhealthy focus on eating in a healthy way. Eating nutritious food is good, but if you have orthorexia, you obsess about it to a degree that it can damage your overall well-being. Eventually, people will avoid whole meals that don't meet their standards or things that they didn't make themselves. So an example of orthorexia might be, it's one thing to spend a few minutes scanning a product label or surfing the web for more information on specific ingredients. However, with orthorexia, you spend hours about food or planning meals or thinking about what you're going to eat next, which can be really problematic and take up a lot of your psyche.
I think a great distinction, you talking about like we naturally may need to get like some sort of nutritional information to like impact satiation or make sure we don't have an allergy. There is a emotional difference in the fear-based experience that orthorexia brings to the table, because it's no longer just about like, yeah, okay, this is probably good for me to like look at, check into. It's if I don't do this, there's no other way. I can't. And it puts up limitations where it may guide someone else.
Absolutely. And it sometimes promotes eating disorder behaviors unintentionally. And I know we'll talk about this a little bit later, but those, what I eat in a day videos and how sometimes you watch those and, it's people who are proud and sharing their stories. And there's no shame also in sharing what you eat in a day and also thinking about the impact in the guide that it gives for other people or the shoulding. What is your intention by sharing some of this stuff? What are you hoping to accomplish? And I think that's where things get a little murky, Abby, and I think that's where we get into the comparison trap. I would also like to say with the clean eating, though, the wellness, there's not a basic diet or a basic thing that is used for everybody and will make everybody healthy. If there was, it would have been packaged and sold to us many, many moons ago. But instead, every couple years or every couple months, there's a new fad trend, right? We're doing the master cleanse. We're doing green smoothies. We're doing X, Y, and Z, which are all great and fine. And it's totally cool if people decide to do those things. And they can be really, really harmful for people who have histories of eating disorders. And so we have to talk about that kind of stuff.
This gets me. This was my entry into an eating disorder. I started out looking to, I think a lot of people do this, go on a health journey because I was convinced like in a very cultural way that this was something I needed. And that took me down the like road of orthorexia into the other eating disorders that I've experienced. And I feel so strongly about this because there's so many things that we're told by people that aren't wise at their information that's so important. Is this our doctor? Is this our dietitian who really knows our body's needs and our histories that's saying, hey, this is good for you to include into your intake, or like, hey, let's modify this? Or is this someone who is maybe across the country has never heard your name? This wasn't made for you. This is just something that like they can put out. And it's so easy to get tripped up on, I see this information, it's getting a lot of positive feedback. It must be true. It must be true for me. And not having the same separation to recognize what someone else is doing doesn't mean that's what I also need to do. So I feel so passionate about being really mindful about, especially in the influencing space, like how those things are being communicated because it can have so much impact.
I think what you're talking about brings up a great point, Abby, of somebody across the world telling you what you should be eating when they've never met you, don't know you, have no idea what your life is like. I think we run into a slippery slope, and I will speak from personal experience because our world has a lot of things going on, and there are a lot of different opinions about these things all of the time. And recently, there has become a really big surge of information around the medical system and the pros and cons of having a medical team and working with clinical folks and feeling supported and like you have a say in your care, which are all very valid things. And I've met so many people who have been talked over, spoken down to by doctors, clinicians. And listening to Jenny from Instagram is not the solution. Like, I don't want to go to the doctor because my doctor has not been eating disorder inclusive or has not done X, Y, and Z. But also that doesn't mean that Jenny from New Hampshire knows what you should be doing too. And I think that's like the biggest differential that we need to make, is because I remember when I was growing up, my family was very much into holistic medicine and healing and using food as medicine, which I think is very, very great. And there's a lot of benefit to having a therapist. There's a lot of benefit to having a dietitian and a psychiatrist. And yes, it's difficult to find the correct one, and sometimes it can be a privilege to find one that listens to you and understands your perspective. I just want to really reiterate that using social media as your primary form of medical care or education is not the way to go.
Yeah.
It's just not.
Oh, I think that's such an important, that's why we have in our intro even, like, this is not a substitute for any kind of therapy or support. We're just here talking, and we are very aware that this is not a substitute for any kind of specialist support. And it can be easy to lose that when the person has 150,000 likes, or it reinforces the idea that this must be true when it might just have that shock value.
Yeah. Or even something different take. This is something that I just learned about, is bot farms. I didn't know that this was a thing. Abby, do you know about bot farms?
No.
Okay, well, I'm not going to act like I'm super well educated on this topic because I'm not. But what I found out is that there are a lot of, we talk about how like you'll go on Ticketmaster and you're trying to get concert tickets and all the bots grabbed them. You know, what are the bots? What does that mean? So basically, people will create algorithms where they are creating multiple different accounts online, and they're posting, commenting, liking, viewing things, either to help out with somebody's like monetary algorithm. They're just like goals online. Like, these bot farms generate tons of money. They could be doing like romance scams or anything. But it was talking about how a lot of the times when people are on news sites or these really big public pages and channels, they'll be arguing with people in the comments, but most of the time what they don't know is that they're bots. It's not real people, and there's nobody behind them saying it. It's all AI. AI is writing the initial comment. AI is writing all of the responses. So you're arguing with a computer. Yeah. And same to be said, though, about social media. You might see somebody who has 150,000 followers, but 100,000 of those might be fake accounts. They might not even be real, too. So a lot of the stuff online is just an illusion that we're holding ourselves to the standard of, which is pretty bananas.
Yeah.
Bot farms.
Bot farms.
Have I gone too down the rabbit hole?
No, I think that's so important. And like, there's a lot to be said is that sometimes there are really great things I've learned off social media. But what I do that I've had to learn is really important is I don't just take that and go, okay, this is now my truth. I'm like, okay, let me look at a different source, a different thing. Let's validate this a little bit. Let's go to someone I trust. Let's go to my therapist. Let's talk about this and just make sure that this is really grounded before I jump into it. Because there are things that people know. Like, people know things and they can share them on social media. It's an effective way of like distributing information, and like having that other checks and balances system is important. There was a post on Facebook that was being passed around a lot of the people that I follow on Facebook, and it was saying something about like the speeding limit. And if you like hit even like 5 miles over, you're going to get a ticket. So it's going on everywhere. And I could have looked at that and gone like, oh no, what? Like, I'm going to have to be super paranoid on the road. Not that I speed, but just, don't want to ever get close to speeding like 5 miles over the limit. And so I decided to try to validate it. And I spent some additional time reading it. And eventually I get to a quote that started to change how I viewed the article. And the quote said something about they may even expect people to stop at stop signs. And I was like, that is an expectation.
Yeah.
And so
that is
one
of the rules of driving.
Turn my head. I get to the very end and it talked about a subscription program where you could pay $99 a month for an additional 3 miles over the speed limit. But if I had just looked at the thing, I would have like freaked out, right?
Everybody's sharing it. And so you think it's the truth, but nobody's fact checked it.
And then when I looked deep and I'm like, this is obviously a joke. This is satire. But again, just talking about how important it is to pause because the shocking information, 5 miles, okay, we can't speed. That's like horrible, end of the world, following the law. But even like it has some shock value. It's so easy just to cycle it versus in like pausing and checking it.
Absolutely. And I think that even speaks to this idea that goes back to the comparison trap of feeling like you have to have an opinion or be an expert about everything. As the world has become more polarized, I have definitely taken a step back on social media because it's not where I want to have these conversations. You and I have this podcast, Abby, as a way for us to talk and share about our experience. And we're talking face to face about it. We might message some people in the comments. But I've realized that when a lot of my dialogue is happening on the internet, there's no real connections happening there. I'm not hearing what the other person has to say or how they're saying it. They don't get to look me in the eyes and see my humanity. It's very easy to just be online and view somebody as a two-dimensional image and be done with it. And so I think what you're saying brings up a very good point, Abby, of sometimes we don't pause, sometimes we shout.
Yeah.
And maybe we need to do more pausing.
And I think this is a good point to talk a little bit about influencers that have that following that a lot of people look at and grab. And some of us, like you said, like we naturally are interested in some people. There are people that I will never meet in my entire life that are more famous that I follow on social media. And I like to see what they share. Influencers. Social media has developed a really interesting field for this, and it can also tie into disordered eating promotion accidentally. Do you have thoughts, feelings, experiences around that?
Definitely. I recently was told, and I support this full-heartedly, that if you're following somebody on social media who constantly makes you feel bad, then you should just unfollow them. But I think on the opposite side of that spectrum, we also think if there's somebody on social media that makes us feel good, we should follow them and make them our top follow and comment and like everything that they're doing. And so what I wanted to speak to a little bit today was talking about a trend that we've been seeing recently where a lot of body positivity, body neutrality, fat influencers are coming out and losing weight or becoming skinny and talking a little bit about how that impacts us and how we're allowed to feel about it because it's not our bodies. So,
yeah,
let's dive into it. Let's get into it.
I think something I want you to elaborate on a little bit is the feelings of betrayal that can pop up when there's something or someone that we've been dedicated to follow because of their stance on eating disorders, body image, you name it. And then that changes and reverses. There can be a very real sense of betrayal. Where do you think that comes from?
I think for myself, I'm going to think about some influencers that I used to follow. So Meghan Trainor, I'm thinking about, I loved when she came out with All About That Bass. I was in high school. I was like, yes, girl. And then Lizzo was another one where I was like, yes, girl, get it. Like, we are living our truth, doing our thing. They build a lot of their products, songs are based off of this, Instagram posts, brand deals. Is basically this idea of that they are relatable. I feel like certain influencers are relatable because they're very secure in their size and they embrace their size, or they have a body positive rhetoric that they're sharing with everybody. And so I think what happens though is we see people suddenly get thin who were once these body positive fat influencers, and then they lose a bunch of weight. What we don't see is that this has probably been multiple years or months in the making of them getting to this point. But two, it can feel like a betrayal because so much of their brand is based around them being body positive and embracing being in a larger body. And so I think a lot of people can look at this and be like, but they were like us. What happened? What are you doing? And so I think that's where a lot of the betrayal feeling comes up.
Absolutely. I think too, for me, I have caught myself putting a lot of hope that like because so and so can be out there being confident in themselves without changing their body, I can too. And it's almost putting like it's a dependency clause. So when all of a sudden the body changes, then am I no longer okay? It's a betrayal, and it's that I had put all my hope and ability to be as I am confidently in someone else. And when that changes and I don't know why, it may like transform how I feel about my ability to be like okay in my space or have representation. And representation is really important. And it's important to remember that as a group, we want to see representation. And these are individuals who have ownership of their bodies. And it's balancing a really delicate, not wanting to make someone a token while also really acknowledging the impact that they've had on yourself or the community that you're in that you want to see represented. It's a hard balance, but yeah, it's complicated.
And it kind of reminds me of the public feeling like they have some kind of ownership over this person and feeling like they have to be able to dictate or censor what they're doing. And though there being that flip side of it, Abby, where they do have a following, they do have this influence and being aware of how they wield it. I think something that comes up a lot for me when I see a lot of relatable influencers or relatable celebrities change overnight is I start getting panicked. I feel a really big sense of urgency of, holy cow, this person went from X to Y, and they have been the most popular person over the last 2 years. So now that they've switched from X to Y, now this is the new trend. So being thin is now more lovable, more successful, more desirable. And now I'm sitting here like, oh, shoot, I don't want to change. I'm not going to change to fit some kind of societal idea, but you do. You start feeling this pressure of like, holy cow, we were just doing all this body love, positivity, live, laugh, love, and now I'm here. How did this happen?
This is something that I've really had to take into consideration myself, is that now that I've experienced an eating disorder, I work in the recovery space, I tend to want to look for disordered eating patterns in the people that are prominent. So if I really look up to someone, I'm going to still keep an eye out. So if there's something that confirms to me that there could be some sort of disordered eating or eating disorder at play, I'm up in arms. When in reality, I don't know any of that. And I would encourage like anyone who's able to support themselves in a way. Sometimes bodies change. That happens. And I have to remind myself that I have a predisposition to want to look for things like that. And I would want someone to give me the benefit of the doubt. Not that it's true, but how can I start to engage in like some compassion and examine why this person's change means a lot to me, because it's okay that it does, but looking at it, and then where do I need to go from here? Because I can't expect them to change it for me. So there's a lot of layers.
And again, it speaks to that point that we were talking about of you're getting a very small look at what this person's experience is like. A lot of these famous celebrities will come out and be like, I'm just focusing on my health, which is a very ambiguous thing to say, right? I'm just focusing on my health. And what happens is people want answers, right? They want to be scoping out for those patterns. And so they come up with their own conclusions about things and jump to whatever narrative best fits the story that they're telling themselves in that moment. So I think the biggest thing that I can offer is that it's okay to be upset when these things happen. It's okay to feel hurt or confused by some of this stuff. And these people are also experiencing body shame too. They also have a lot of internalized dialogue that they're under a microscope. And so being able to extend that empathy and kindness and not get stuck in the comparison trap is huge.
We've really had a lot of different aspects of social media covered, from neurological, dopamine responses, comparison to others, talking about just how broadly social media impacts us. I think the talk about influencers is so important because we're bombarded on this in every front. We have a lot more to jump into, namely about what do we do about this content, but that's not for today. That is for episode 2. So we will be wrapping up here. Please tune back in for us. We're excited to keep talking about this, and we will see you next time. That's Abby and Gabby signing off.
Fireside Snack is hosted by Abby Dinges and Gabby Buckner. Editing, music, and artwork by Gabby Buckner. Please email us at firesidesnack@gmail.com with your recovery questions and be on the lookout for weekly episodes. Thank you for joining us for Fireside Snack and for filling our cups up with gratitude. Enjoy your week.